Political shockwaves in Europe as France's Prime Minister resigns just weeks into the job, deepening President Macron's crisis. Plus, signs of an economic rebound in sub-Saharan Africa as the World Bank upgrades its growth forecast. Those are major talking points on World Now today. Hello and thanks for joining us. I am Precious Amayu. We begin in Europe, where fresh political turmoil grips France. Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu has resigned just 27 days into the job, throwing President Emmanuel Macron's government into crisis once again. With Parliament deadlocked and elections looming, President Macron faces one of the most uncertain moments of his presidency. Mr. Lecornu, a close Macron ally, quit before unveiling his policy agenda, saying rival parties refused to compromise on budget and reform plans. His resignation makes him the third prime minister to fall in under 2 years, as President Macron struggles to steer a deeply divided parliament. The crisis stems from President Macron's decision to dissolve parliament last year, hoping to restore clarity. Instead, he delivered a stalemate with left and right blocs blocking minority governments and threatening no confidence votes. Now, President Macron faces three unappealing options: appoint another prime minister, potentially France's sixth in less than 2 years, dissolve parliament and call new elections, or resign himself, something analysts say he's unlikely to do. Fresh elections could hand victory to Marine Le Pen's far-right national rally, now leading polls, while resignation would trigger an early presidential race. For now, France's 2026 budget is on hold, and the government risks operating under temporary spending rules. With no easy solution, Macron's presidency is entering one of his most precarious moments yet. International law expert Livingstone Weche joins me for more on this. Good to have you join us, Livingstone.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I mean, it's been a really tough second term for President Macron. He's seen resignation of three prime ministers. There's been protest in France over his policies. His bills are deadlocked in the Legislative House. What do you make of what's going on in France?
What's going on in France is basically the beauty of democracy, the contestation therein that arises when you have ideological divides among political opponents or political stakeholders, because France is a multi-party, has a multi-party democracy, and it's a parliamentary system of government where critical to the presidency is the head of the government, which has to do with the prime minister. And as you have rightly mentioned, you can see that the implication and the consequence of the current political logjam has resulted in economic collapse, because it is reported that the stock market in Paris has nosedived because of loss of confidence and seeming expression of political instability. So politics plays a crucial role in the economic fortunes of a state such as France, and it has already begun to spiral into the rest of Europe, because, you know, they run a union in Europe, that is the European Union. So a country as critical as France, which is currently faced with this level of political instability, where between December and now, it has had three consecutive prime ministers, with the current resigned prime minister leaving just within 26 days. That in itself is a voice of conflict. And you have options before the president, which you have made references to: resign.
And I want us to talk about those options. Livingstone, I know that you've already started touching on them. The options before him, you mentioned appointing another president. This is his last loyalist. Lecornu, he has had Beru, he has had Barnier, and then Lecornu, which people feel like is his last loyalist. Some say he could appoint a socialist. But again, that will be deadlocked in parliament. He could resign himself. They've said that's unlikely. And then there could be another election which could hand Marine Le Pen victory all over again. I mean, which of this is plausible, and how much of a crisis is he in?
No, if he has run into deficit for solution, he should just quickly resign, throw in the towel. But you see, he's battling between his personal interest, his legacy, and that of the interest of France. His prime minister, who resigned in December, who was ousted from power or toppled from government, as they put it, was removed because of his austerity measures that was introduced and was resisted by parliament. And so vote of no confidence was passed. So his attempt to conduct election at some point in July last year did not go down well. It almost made him lose credibility in governance. But again, his option at this point is either he resigns if he has run deficit, because the current prime minister who has just resigned is said to have been his last option on his cards put on the table. So the battle before Macron right now, even though he has vowed that he is not leaving government until 2027, is possibly to resign and leave the scene, because there is a high contestation of ideological differences among the far rights and the far lefts. And then when that is in view, it becomes difficult for him to make any progress, because it does appear that every program and proposal he makes to parliament is being churned down. And so what responsible and very conscious governments within that climb have done in recent times is to resign and leave the scene. If you don't have the type of solution, or at best, he has to make concessions with his political opponents, because I think this is a question of negotiation. You have to negotiate the terms of the policy frameworks you're introducing that may have been resisted by other political platforms. But if he fails to make that negotiation and concession at this time, particularly at an era where France is struggling to gain or to sustain momentum in its economy, given the current upheaval it is having from its former colonies, where it rests its economic strength from. So it becomes an option before him to say, look, what are the demands by the opposing parties and what concessions am I willing to make? Because I believe that negotiation with the political opponents can proffer solution to this particular crisis, except if he maintains his political ideology, then it may lead to a total collapse of his government, and possibly he may be forced to resign shamefully.
So we have seen post-war political turbulence in Italy. We've also seen a debt crisis in Greece that lasted for a while, and Greece had to be bailed out. Now we're seeing, from the reports we're getting, 114% of debt profile against its GDP. That's France. You've also mentioned how its former colonies are all withdrawing allegiance. And I'm just wondering if France, in your opinion, is the new sick man of Europe.
France is almost deceased. It is only survival when you say someone is in ICU, because obviously it is coming back to its hidden realities. The analysis on French economy currently is that each citizen is seen as owing as much as £50,000 in debt crisis. So if you do the debt spread and the map of French citizenship, you'll find each French citizen owing about £50,000. That's what a report says. So if that is anything to go by, and France is not able to evolve a workable or practicable solution to the current crisis, it may lead to a total bankruptcy or insolvency, however you want to put it, because the country is becoming very, very insolvent. And it's obvious that, of course, France survives on the free proceeds from its former colonies, and that is beginning to disconnect from those type of sources. So it is obvious that France is on a very highway drive journey into a bankruptcy until and except it begins to rethink its options on the table. It's a very disastrous condition to find a president at this point in time. But the options are still before him. If the opponents, the far lefts, the respective political divides feel that his resignation will save the nation, then he should concede and resign or rethink his approach, because the only prime minister that should have saved him has resigned. And it is said that part of the grounds for his resignation and why his proposals were rejected was that in trying to form a new government, the same faces that formed the old government are being recycled again, which is being greeted with resistance, and that is to say that they bring to the table. So it's Uhuru at this point.
Let's talk about what happened in the wake of Brexit. We saw that France and Germany sort of, took leadership and provided leadership, in not just in Europe, at the European Union level, but also in Europe. And I'm wondering what it means now for the sovereignty of Europe if France appears to be weakened, especially at a critical time when we're seeing a shift in geopolitics and the policies of President Trump.
No, the point is they have the European Union to come to their rescue. You see, the way Europe functions, they run a community legal system where the laws of the European Union as enacted by the European Parliament is the community and the supreme law of the whole of Europe. So they have an option to possibly resort to what's it called? To resort to not, if they are not able to seek for a hand of fellowship from the European Union, then they will end up in an island of isolation. So it's in an isolationist mode, unfortunately, and rightly put so. It's a very bad taste for France at this time, and it's a very bitter reality if they don't take steps to either Macron giving up his presidency and allowing for a more competent negotiation to take place to salvage the country, or else it will go totally bankrupt.
Thank you so much for your time. We are following developments in France, especially because you mentioned earlier the legacy of President Macron and what this means. We'll continue to follow that. Livingstone Weche, international law expert, always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
All right, we'll take a break now, where when we return, we'll turn our attention to sub-Saharan Africa. It's quite a different story here. What bank has said, the economy of the West, sub-Saharan Africa, seems to have grown and inflation has reduced. We'll see, what that means and how that impacts on the reality on the ground. Stay with us, everyone. You're watching What